Well, hello and welcome to an all-new episode of the Transfix Take podcast, where we are performance-driven. It's the week of November 22nd, and we are bringing you news, insights, and trends for shippers and carriers from our market expert, Justin Mays. And Mays, we have finally made it.
Hey Jenny, it's great to be back with you as well. And you're right, we finally arrived at the Thanksgiving holiday week and to kick off the holidays of Q4, where we are likely going to see some volatility, but the question is just how much.
Mays, why don't we give some historical context on why we should expect volatility around the holiday season?
Well, Jenny, there are multiple reasons why we see volatility around the holidays, but it actually brings us to our fun fact of the freight markets. And it's interesting that the surge in traffic on Black Friday can actually cause significant delays for truck drivers, especially in major metropolitan areas where everyone's rushing to different stores to get those sales on Black Friday and the extended weekend. And matter of fact, Jenny, there are 41% more traffic jams on Black Friday than there is on a typical Friday. And on average, these traffic jams can consume 28% more time than a typical traffic jam. So there's no doubt out there that, not only is there volatility in the freight markets, but there's a lot of volatility in traffic that impacts truck drivers out on the roads just trying to get to their destination or their pickup.
Which is a great time to remind everyone to be thankful, especially thankful for drivers around these holidays. It's the only way that we get these packages delivered to our homes. So thank you to drivers. And Mays, we may even see a big spike coming up for Black Fridays. What do you think about that?
That's right, Jenny. A lot of people are going to be out there this week looking for the deals for the holidays. But for drivers out there, they got somewhat of a deal coming their way as well, as we've already started to see rates increase, while the cost at the pump has decreased yet again as fuel dropped another 8.5 cents this week from last week. But it's not the only thing drivers are seeing out there. Like I pointed out, we are seeing rates start to climb as tender rejections are also rising.
Now, typically we don't like to sound like a broken record here, but if this is the first time that you're listening to this podcast and trying to figure out what are the levers that are going to push some sort of volatility into the market, Mays, you've got the answer for me. What should we expect?
It's not going to be a whole lot of volatility with the oversupply we have in the market currently. But as always, we still anticipate some Thanksgiving holiday week volatility. Overall, I anticipate rates to increase over the next week into early next week, as there's a lot of hangover freight, meaning that there's a lot of facilities that cannot ship on Thursday, may be closed on Friday, that push volume to that following Monday. And at the same time, we are approaching the end of month during that same time period. So expect the freight markets early next week to also be tighter, where drivers are still able to possibly push up rates before they come back down going into December.
That's right. So the next 2 weeks are certainly going to be ones to keep an eye out for, especially with those rates getting up in favor of carriers. That said, you know what it's time for, the regional breakdown. Why don't we get started on the West Coast? What's happening there?
The West Coast continues to be the one region that is a little more optimistic for carriers, although 4 of the 6 regions have seen an aggregate increase from last Monday to this current Monday. But we're actually seeing the Pacific Northwest heat back up. I know last week I called that we are starting to see it simmer down, but freight picking up and originating out of the Washington state and other states such as Montana and Idaho continue to see a surge in rates. But when you go down to Southern California and the lower part of the West Coast, we're still seeing some loosening, with rates seeing a slim decline. But Jenny, anticipate this to change the next time we talk, where most of these locations will actually see an increase as we go into the holidays, especially California. I think we're going to see that longer lengths of haul pick up some steam as carriers start hauling this freight over the holiday weekend, where a lot of them may end up with extra days of transit due to facilities closing.
Yeah, it's those Friday facility closures that are certainly going to be ones to watch. But why don't we move on over to the Midwest, Mays? What's going on over there?
It's starting to get cold out there, but the freight market overall hasn't moved too much. We saw a slight uptick in the average rate for freight picking up in the Midwest, but it's going to vary by market. There's no clear trends of any specific markets or states that are experiencing tighter capacity than others. But again, similar to the West Coast, we're going to continue to see the Midwest pick up some steam as we go into the holidays. My one call out in the Midwest would be for reefer freight, as reefer markets continue to tighten, with the national outbound tender rejection on reefer freight over 10% now, and there's a lot of reefer freight that originates out of the Midwest. Matter of fact, Jenny, Wisconsin is the #1 supplier in the U.S. of cranberries And I'm not a big fan of cranberries, but there's a lot of cranberries that have shipped out of Wisconsin over the last couple weeks for the Thanksgiving holiday.
What? I can't believe you don't like cranberry sauce. It is my favorite thing to eat around Thanksgiving. But I know we want to move on over to the east side, so where do you want to go next, Maze?
We're going to talk about the Northeast, where just about every freight market actually saw a decrease from last Monday to today. And this is one of the two regions that saw a decrease in the aggregate rate leaving the region. Now, it's interesting when you look at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania's market, which saw a little over 1% increase in the average rate from last week to today. And let's be honest, this is attached essentially to the Midwest, so we could start seeing this tightening spread across to the Northeast. And at the end of the day, Jenny, I do believe we're going to see some tightening come to the Northeast. It may not be applied as much as we're going to see on the West Coast and Midwest.
All right, well, let's continue the journey down I-95 and go over to the coastal region,
which is the second region of two after the Northeast that saw rates actually decline from last week to this week. Though, again, this is not going to continue going into next week. And when you look at it, it's really freight going longer lengths of haul out of the coastal region that's driving that decrease. Freight that's staying within the coastal region is actually experiencing a slight increase, especially city and local freight in the Virginia area, where it's seeing an over 2% increase in the average rate. Now again, Jenny, this is going to play out like the rest of the country, where we see some pressure on the spot market driving rates as a whole up in the coastal region and across the country until we hit December. Then I believe that we're going to see coastal region continue to decline.
All right, and what is happening over in the southeast? Which region is this one?
The one of two regions that, relatively drivers can still enjoy their windows down with some nice weather, depending on where you are, because Atlanta's getting a little bit cold, Jenny. But if they're going as far as Florida, they can still get that breeze with the windows down. But the freight markets in the southeast actually saw tightening from last week to this week. Now, not in Florida. Florida continues to be a very loose state where capacity is easy to find, but Mississippi, Tennessee, and Alabama all are seeing tightening as capacity is harder to find for the freight, for the demand these states are seeing. But I think this is short-lived because these states don't really drive much volume into the market to begin with. But when we go to Georgia and look at Atlanta, Georgia, freight market in particular, which is the second largest market by volume, we're seeing a very slim increase, less than 0.5%, but it may be a telling sign for this week to see a little more pressure. But again, I think we're going to see less of a market reaction in the southeast due to Thanksgiving holiday than we will see in other regions such as the West Coast and Midwest.
Of course, we'll keep a close eye on that. Now, what's going on over in the southern region, Maze?
We saw rates basically remain relatively flat with less than a 0.1% increase week over week. There's not a whole lot to talk about in the state of Texas. It really is market dependent, but again, markets did not increase or decrease noticeably from last week to this week. And I don't think we're going to see too much of a reaction to the Thanksgiving holiday, either outside of a very slim increase due to tender rejections increasing. But at the end of the day, carriers in the South and Southeast are going to continue to want to get out of these regions as they are unfavorable for this time of the year. And they want to make sure they start off December right and in a good region, which could continue to experience some pressure going later into next week.
Interesting. So it looks like the West Coast dominates in terms of rates that are favorable for carriers, right, Maze?
That's right, Jenny. The West Coast we continue to talk about and how it's one of the only areas where drivers can continue to see some pressure put on the freight markets. And maybe over the next week, everyone goes out and, really takes advantage of those deals for Black Friday and clears inventory out to where everything needs to be replenished. I can tell you, Jenny, when you look at imports, especially in Los Angeles and Long Beach, they are higher this past month than they were last year for the same time period. Now, it's still not as high as it was during the pandemic, which is no surprise, but it says something that imports look like they are slowly starting to pick up. And maybe if everyone does go out and take advantage of these sales, we will be talking about a different freight market for the next couple months out on the West Coast.
You know what, Maze? I was actually talking to Paul Pojemski here, and I actually do think that we are going to see a record number of sales hit and consumer consumption go up quite a bit in November, but only time will tell.
That's right, Jenny. I'm sounding very optimistic, but hey, look at the cost of diesel in California. It's below $5 for the first time since July, so some things are moving in the right direction out on the West Coast for carriers. It's just how long is it going to last?
Well, that's what we're here for, Maze. We're going to break it down for them in the next week or so, and I anticipate that next week will be a longer episode as we explore the trends.
Well, Jenny, it was all great talking this week. I know it's a shorter week with Thanksgiving and everything, but it's not a shorter week, as you know, for all the drivers out there and everyone who works at different warehouses and shippers, and we thank everyone out there that keeps things going, whether it's through the pandemic, the holidays, a national weather event. These drivers keep going out there, and we couldn't be more thankful for everyone in this industry that keeps the wheels turning and things moving for everyday consumers.
That's right. I could not have said it better, Maze. Really thankful and appreciative for all of the drivers out there. It has certainly not been an easy year for them by any means, but why don't you take us home and tell us what we're going to talk about next week?
That's right, Jenny. Next week, we're going to do a look back, see how the markets played out, what type of volatility did we really experience, and start talking about the remainder and final month of the year, December, which we are likely going to see markets trend downward before the Christmas and New Year's holiday. But I look forward to seeing, what carriers were able to push out of the market, because it's going to be a telling sign going into 2024. And I cannot believe we're already talking about 2024, Jenny. But again, thank you to all the drivers out there, and thank you, Jenny, for keeping this show going and helping drivers, carriers, shippers, and everyone else continue to be informed about what's going on in the freight markets.
Well, it could not have been done without you, Maze. Thank you so much to your incredible partnership, your amazing insights, and I very much look forward to speaking with you throughout the rest of the year. You're right, I can't believe we're talking about 2024, but we are only weeks away, if you can believe it. That said, everyone, please drive safely on the road. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week with an all-new episode of the Transfix Take podcast. All views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Transfix Inc. or any parent companies or affiliates or the companies with which the participants are affiliated and may have been previously disseminated by them. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are based upon information considered reliable, but neither Transfix Inc. nor its affiliates nor the companies with which the participants are affiliated warrant its completeness or accuracy, and it should not be relied upon as such. All views and opinions are subject to change.